Telecast, the TV industry news review.
What's the story behind Roku? And what's the original content strategy for the Roku channel? What are South Shore Productions' plans for growth? And how do you give yourself a confidence booster now we're all back to a sort of normal? On this week's show, I'm joined by Miriam Laux, VP of International Platform at Roku, Melanie Leach, Joint CEO of South Shore Productions, and wellbeing expert Tracy Forsyth. It's all coming up on this week's Telecast. My first guest on this week's show is Miriam Laux, VP of International Platform at Roku. Welcome to Telecast, Miriam.
Thanks very much for having me, Justin.
Where are we speaking to from?
I'm based in the Netherlands. I'm actually on a houseboat in Amsterdam.
On a houseboat? Fantastic.
Yep.
Oh, brilliant. Well, that's one of the best locations we've had, right? Guests coming from a houseboat. Does Roku have offices in Amsterdam and all over Europe?
We have an office in Amsterdam, a small one, and we're actually just about to sign a new lease for a larger office. So we're growing nicely in size in Amsterdam. Amsterdam is our international headquarters. We have offices all over Europe as well, one in the UK, in Denmark, but also globally. We're active in over 20 countries.
We're going to get into a little bit more of detail of the business a little bit later on. I mean, it's particularly great to have you on this week's show after last week's episode, where we were discussing the future of factual TV, new funding models, streaming services, and in particular, AVOD. So I'm going to start right from basics here, because I know a lot of our audience are aware of Roku as a brand, but I wonder how many have had the chance to experience the platform for themselves. Can you take us through the history of Roku, how it started, and who and where is the audience?
We get this actually a lot, that people have heard the name because it's a big company in the US and now also internationally expanding. But a lot of times people kind of see us as a hardware company, a stick company, and they don't understand the entire ecosystem that Roku by now is offering. So it started definitely off as a hardware system. So the company was created in 2002 by our still current CEO and founder, Anthony Wood. Headquarters are in San Jose and offices all across the US as well as internationally, as I just mentioned. Company is the last kind of size of figures that we published end of last year is around 2,000 employees. We've added employees in this very extraordinary year since the pandemic started. And revenue is around $1.8 billion in 2020, and we're NASDAQ publicly quoted. But overall, history is an interesting one because Anthony, when he created Roku is, by the way, the Japanese word for the number 6. It's the sixth company that Anthony has founded. And it was founded in 2002, way before Anthony then moved and worked for Netflix to actually create the first streaming player that was then launched in 2008 as the Netflix. So it was the first device that actually enabled consumers to stream Netflix on their TV. So that was the beginning of all. So there's a close relationship between Netflix and Roku because of that history. But then Netflix decided to not go with their own with their own hardware, and then basically Anthony took that invention and brought it back to the company that he already had created beforehand. And this is the kind of starting point for Roku.
That's really interesting. I didn't know any of that. The Roku number 6, that's good. A good TV industry pub quiz question, actually. So, I'll keep that in the back of my mind. So when it comes to the audience that's been developed, and I think, we've seen from media coverage, particularly over the last 18 months during the pandemic, we've seen lots of SVODs have done very well. All streaming services have done well as everybody's been indoors and, looking for new types of entertainment. So how has that affected Roku in terms of its audience? How many people consume TV or streaming through Roku, and where are they?
At the end of Q2 of this year, we announced that we have 55.1 million active accounts. Active accounts is for us a little bit of a proxy of households. And this has been as tragic as the pandemic has been for us, for the entire planet. It's been really good for the streaming industry, because obviously a lot of people were staying home, and so there was a lot of streaming consumption that increased dramatically since the first lockdown. And for us, it's been really an interesting journey, because we are of the strong belief that all TV will be streamed. That also means that all advertising is going to be streamed. And our mission is to be the best streaming platform that connects the entire TV ecosystem. So it definitely has been the last 18 months very, very exciting for us to grow the company. And, it is a US-based company, and it's, the large part of the 55 million are based in the US, but our biggest priority is now to do international expansion, and this is why we're launching, and we have already business in the UK, in Canada, in 12 Latin American countries. We launched Brazil a year and a half ago. We're very strong in Mexico already, and we just announced our German launch as well, so which we're going to be doing shortly. So there is international expansion is a big priority for the company, but the majority of the audiences are still in the US at the moment.
It's really interesting. You were talking about the background where Roku came from and the hardware approach that you're taking, which is pretty unique, other than, I suppose, Apple TV, in terms of other streaming services that are available through hardware. So just so I'm really clear about how consumers access Roku, there are a number of sticks, aren't there? There are sticks like dongles, if you like. People often call them, that you put in the back of your TV, goes in the USB port, a little bit like a Chromecast, connect it to the internet, and then essentially it's like an app-based interface that you can then go and explore. Is that a fairly reasonable description of it, or is that rubbish?
It's one way to consume Roku. There are two ways to consume Roku, or to get access to our platform. So there's the Roku streaming players that you just mentioned, that are sold through retail stores like Argos and Currys and Amazon, for example. And we just, by the way, launched our Roku streaming stick 4K, which is the best streaming stick we've done so far. And also maybe a background information, the Roku actually pioneered the form factor of a streaming stick in 2014. Before, there were kind of boxes that were bigger, but the typical streaming stick that you see, also other competitors, adapting in that same point, was actually invented at Roku. And the Roku streaming stick 4K that we just launched is designed to get the customer to content even faster. It has a faster processor and also better Wi-Fi. So I think there's two ways. There's the sticks, but there's also the other path to get access to our platform, which is the TV manufacturing side. So Roku is actually an operating system. It's a little bit like the glue that brings all the different pieces of the TV industry together, like the manufacturers, the services, the customers. It's an operating system to TV manufacturers. So we have over 15 TV manufacturers that license our operating system, which is fully focused only on the TV experience, right? We don't do anything else. And they license the operating system. So when you buy a, let's say, Hisense TV in the UK, you go into the shop and you buy the TV, bring it home, and you switch it on. And the first thing that you see is a Roku user experience, very purple, which is our color. Very happy with the purple color. And then you can see, the user experience. You can see the different services: Netflix, Prime Video, Disney Plus, all of this that you can then authenticate, or you can buy. You can. There's TVOD services, so you can rent or buy.
Should we view this as a platform that all other apps sit on as well? So it's not just a case of accessing the Roku channel. It's actually a whole interface that all the other apps, Apple TV and Netflix, they all sit within, essentially.
Exactly. So that's exactly what an operating system does. It brings all the partners together. So we have a channel store where thousands of apps are sitting in, and obviously the biggest ones, the Netflixes, the Prime Videos, the Disney Pluses, but also on the AVOD side, other services as well. So That is basically what we do. We're bringing everybody together, and we believe that the operating system will be the glue in the middle of the entire system. So the reason why we think that Roku is very well positioned is because we're licensing our operating system out to all of those TV manufacturers. If you look back, TV manufacturing is a very hard business at this point. The margins are small. Lots of people actually left the business over the last 10 years because it's really hard to kind of make this work. You need to have the scale, and you also need to have a really good operating system on your TV. And that is very hard to develop in the first place, and then even harder to maintain because, you have various models, older TVs that still need to be updated and refreshed. So for a TV manufacturer to have your own operating system and develop this and have the engineering departments kind of doing their kind of more proprietary system, this is getting harder and harder. And we believe that only a few TV manufacturers will be having their own operating system, and the rest will be licensing an operating system into their TVs. And this is where Roku comes in. We're licensing ours out because we're so focused on just the TV experience. We don't have to kind of, make sure that people buy shoes or buy cell phones or stay a lot of time in the search or in other services. We're very focused on optimizing the TV user experience. So I think this is why the operating system is, that is focused on TV, on the TV user experience, so important for the TV manufacturers going forward.
Right. Okay. So we'll see a lot of new smart TVs coming to the market with Roku operating systems. And we've got the sticks, which essentially, is it right to say that if I don't have a smart TV, but I have a TV with a USB stick and I put the Roku stick in, it's almost like becomes a smart TV in a way, right?
Yes, that's it. That's exactly the point where people are buying the streaming devices. They want to make their existing TV smart.
Okay, good. That sounds like it makes perfect sense. So when it comes to channels and what's available in the hardware, you have a number of remote control devices on the sticks that work with the sticks that actually have Netflix buttons already incorporated into them. To give us an idea of the best performing channels and brands on Roku. Now, we'll talk about the Roku channel in a second, but in terms of third-party services, which are the best performing?
I mean, we work with all partners in the markets. We really like our kind of more neutral positioning. Obviously, the big SVOD partners that we have, on the platform globally, also in the US, are the big names that everybody knows: the Netflix, the Prime Videos, the Disney Plus, the Sky, the Zone. There are so many, but the ones which obviously the best kind of rights portfolio and the nicest and the best user experience, and also a great kind of price value relationship. They are the one that is also the biggest services on our platform. They are the biggest services in a country then, so also on our platform.
When we're talking about Roku, I think a lot of the content industry in particular sat up and really took notice of Roku after the acquisition of the Quibi content earlier this year, which was, I think, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was about 75 different shows and hundreds of hours of content that was announced back in May, which was a huge news. And there's obviously some really fantastic quality, and it's all premium, a lot of it Hollywood shot content. Chrissy's Court, Reno 911, Dummy, which is one of my favorites. And how's it performing? How's the content performing? How's that rollout of the Quibi content, which is now called Roku Originals, obviously? How's that rollout going?
Yeah, so we bought the library early this year, and then we launched the library. A lot of the shows were not even seen before by anybody in the US either, but also not internationally. And we made them our first Roku Originals. And the Roku channel is the exclusive destination for those Roku Originals, so you don't get them anywhere else. And the decision to kind of make this, to acquire this library is already paying off. In June, we actually announced a couple of stats on how it's doing. And there's a record number of unique accounts that streamed the Roku channel. We have those Roku Originals in the UK, in Canada, and in the US. And the top 10 watched programs on the Roku channel were all Roku Originals. So for us, that really was worthwhile investing in that library. More than 1 in 3 users of the Roku channel streamed a Roku Original already. And in June, we also celebrated a huge milestone for Roku Originals because we included our first season 2 that was greenlit for Die Hard with Kevin Hart, which is one of my favorites out of all of the shows. It's hilarious how he kind of plays himself, and I just love his humor there. So Roku Originals overall providing an important audience driver for the Roku channel. So it's an important piece. But it's only one piece, right? So I think when you run an AVOD service, you have to make sure you get content from various sources. We license a lot of content from existing partners. We will continue to be licensing content from existing partners. We're oftentimes also getting new partners. So the Roku Originals or the own production on greenlighting, like second seasons and all that is one component. But the larger strategy is to kind of bring great content to our AVOD users for free, because when the Roku channel was created in the US, that was actually the reason why it was created in the first place in 2019 in the UK and earlier in the US as well. Because we found a lot of people searching for free content on our channel store, and we thought at the time it wasn't really there wasn't a lot of free options available. So that's the reason why we created the Roku channel in the first place, because there was a demand, there was not a lot of offer. So we said, okay, let's invest in this in our own AVOD store and our own AVOD channel. So that's the little bit the history of the Roku channel in the first place.
Okay, coming back to the originals for a second, with that many shows and that much content that you acquired in one go, that was coincided with the launch of Roku Originals. I mean, was that an opportunistic move, or was it something that you always wanted to get into original content and this just happened to sort of supersize that move?
I think might have been a little bit of both. We're always looking around and trying to find the best content for our customers, and that opportunity came up, and we saw that as another way to kind of be able to show great content to our customers. And it was highly the production value is really high. We were able to get to acquire the entire library. We actually launched the library in a pretty unusual way. As the first wave of Roku Originals, and the second wave just followed then in August this year. We actually had a lot of shows being premiered on the Roku channel as Roku Originals in one go. This is when you have a larger library like that. We also wanted to kind of create a big buzz around this, and we have like top names attached to the Roku Original, right? Kevin Hart is one of them. So that's basically the reason why we bought this, because it was great content. We thought, we could actually show that content to a lot of our users for the first time, because there hadn't been maybe users before. So we thought, this is a great opportunity for us to kind of move more and to acquire all the entire library. And it was definitely the right move. It really paid off for us. So very, very
good. Okay.
That.
Well, that's good to hear. And how much Quibi content, or how many Roku Originals, should I say, have yet to surface on the Roku channel?
Yeah, so we will still have a long time new shows premiering through that library. So we've already done 2 waves, and with a number of shows going out. And then now I think we're going to be, moving from those kind of larger waves into smaller pieces, more, regular premieres that we want to do. So I think that's the strategy going forward.
Presumably there was a lot of shows that haven't been announced yet, that were in production, maybe that you've got the opportunity to announce and PR around Roku, right?
Yeah, that's the idea. So basically creating buzz around the new shows. I mean, when we acquired the Quibi library, there was also shows that were still in production, so that hadn't been shown before to anybody, not even in the US. There's shows that were in an earlier kind of setting that we've decided to kind of continue. There is shows that were already at the end of their cycle that we can now bring out. So this will be a continuous effort to premiere those shows. It wasn't like, we acquired a ready library and then we can just premiere that and show that to the customer. It's an ongoing, it's a living segment there, or a living, breathing library that we were buying. So there is still way more to come for sure.
Right. Did you have to recut everything? Because presumably it was all in short form format before. So is it all been recut as long form?
No, we actually did not recut this. We left it in the original shape. It was optimized for that original shape, so up to 15 minutes per episode. But we have this function, which is basically, if you don't do anything, it continues just playing one episode after the other. So this automatic way. So it doesn't really feel like when obviously when you want to leave and you don't want to watch anymore, you leave after the episode one, and then, but you have to kind of stop. You have to press stop for it. But if you don't do anything, that it just continues to play the next episode. So it doesn't really kind of come across as a short form content. If you kind of continue watching, it's there is an entire arc around the shows, and you don't really have that impression that it's some of the scripted shows are also serialized. So there's a hook at the end, but then it goes to the next episode pretty quickly. So I think we didn't have to do anything around it. It was perfect as it was.
It probably feels like a natural ad break, right? In terms of
exactly, yeah.
Okay. Now, I know our audience is going to be really interested in hearing about your ongoing original strategy. So, are you now looking to commission new content, and if so, what kind of shows are you looking for?
Yeah, I think on the Roku Originals. So Roku Originals for us is a great way to acquire and to show wonderful content to our audience. It's one way to do that. We will still be continuing licensing content. We'll still be adding through our existing partners as well as through new partners, and we will be also looking at originals, at expanding the Roku Originals. The Roku channels can give. We want to be the home for creators. So the Roku channel wants to become the home for creators as well. So the Roku channel can give those creators an engaged audience. And 100 days into their launching the originals, we've already seen that we've already launched 2 separate states. What I mentioned before, the Wave 1 and Wave 2 that just happened in August, which included a handful of never before seen shows. We have expanded into second seasons already. We've seen it works really well. There is adding additional episodes to an existing show, which is also another option. So all of those kind of roads, all of this is something we want to do. But there's nothing that we are today announcing of we're adding more. I think it's always about finding great content that is easily accessible for customers, because we won't be an SVOD service like Netflix with a $20 billion content budget. We are an AVOD service, so we want to kind of serve the best content for that special use case that we have with an AVOD service. AVOD for us will be an addition to SVOD. So there's no kind of competition in a way that we are going to be replacing any of the SVOD services or the SVOD category anytime soon. This is an additional piece to the highbrow, a lot of the highbrow and a lot of high production value shows that the SVOD providers are offering.
Right. But presumably, as you said right at the beginning of our conversation, that you're really looking to push into international markets now. Does that mean that, for example, in the UK, you might be looking to commission original content from UK indies, and the same in Germany? Is that something that you can see happening?
I think, we just started with all of this journey. So I think it will be too early to already say, okay, let's localize our originals. We are at the moment still in the learning phase. We've just started this year. So we haven't already, 10 years of experience in that field to look back to. So I think it would be too early to already start producing UK originals or Canadian originals at this point. We're very happy with the quality that is coming out of the Roku Originals team in the US at the moment, and who knows what's going to happen in the future. But at the moment, there's no plans to localize originals internationally.
I guess it's test and learn, isn't it?
Exactly. So for us, this is a new field, and we're very happy of how it went. But there's still so much to learn for us in the talent community in Hollywood, for example, to kind of make ourselves a name for to be a great destination for creators. All of this is still happening, is still in the early phases. So I think everything beyond that would be a little bit too ambitious at this point. Yeah.
And those commissioning decisions are really being made in LA, I suppose, with the Originals team. Is that right? How that operates?
Yeah, at the moment, the Originals team is based in LA for sure. But obviously, we're given that that international expansion is such an important part for Roku's going forward, we obviously discuss with them, on a regular basis to see what are the universal topics that they can pick. And on the international side, there's definitely value in having a seat on those discussions and having a seat on the table when we make commissioning decisions, because we want to kind of use those Roku Originals for our Roku channel that is currently only in the UK and in Canada. We obviously have the goal of expanding the Roku channel also in the other markets that we're expanding as a company overall. So we can use those Roku Originals in those countries as well. So they also need to be appealing on a more global level. And we also want to kind of go into that direction as well.
Okay. So library content. Now, that's obviously hugely important on the Roku channel as well. I've been having a look, and lots of familiar program brands: Born Mucky, What We Do in the Shadows, Yukon Men, Salvage Hunters, Hell's Kitchen. Is there for example, Baywatch is one of the biggest TV brands ever.
You're talking to a German, you know that.
Yeah, well, there we are. It's the new home of Baywatch.
The New York David Hasselhoff, great.
Yeah. Well, that's he's still big. He still does gigs as well over there, doesn't he? Which is extraordinary. So essentially, if I'm a distributor and I have a show brand which has got, I don't know, 40, 50 hours, 100 hours worth of back catalog, I mean, is that program brands, series brands as channels on the Roku channel?
There is a home for both opportunities. So if you are on the Roku channel in the UK, we have a catalog now of 25,000 titles. There will be titles on there which are great kind of brand names, such as the Hasselhoff, the Baywatch, where it makes sense to also have a fast channel around it, or where it makes sense to kind of add make this franchise available in another use format. And there will be shows where that doesn't make any sense at all. There will be other kind of packaging. We have editorial hubs, for example, on the Roku channel, where we have genre hubs where it makes sense to be part of that. So there is I think a home for all of the content, but iconic content like the Baywatch, where there is also a deep kind of library and large number of episodes that have been produced. There, it makes sense to kind of add that as an additional way for people to be able to consume that.
Yeah. Okay. In terms of library content going forward, what performs particularly well?
Yeah, there was a lot of surprises that are also working really well. For example, there's a show called McLeod's Daughters, which is something I think it's an Australian show beginning of the 2000s, a library show that hasn't been very much exploited for a long time, and somehow found its way back into the AVOD space. That's a show that, for example, works really well in terms of licensed library shows. Sometimes you're just very surprised of what people watch, and then you learn from what the customers want, and then you go out and source similar stuff because you have seen that this is a recipe. And then other shows like Hell's Kitchen, all of those, on the cooking side, on the kind of documentary side, or on the kind of unscripted side. I think there's also a lot, from in the Roku Original side, but also on the licensing side that kind of works really well. I think with AVOD, given that it's in addition to the SVOD piece, it also brings, there's the comedy genre, there's the factual genre, there's also the kids genre in the UK that we have. All of those are kind of additional shows, additional genres that people are really interested in. So I think that's where we have to find, or we are finding our home and our niche and our our kind of place in the world, because there was obviously no point of replicating what the large SVOD providers do.
Do you solely deal with distributors when it comes to acquiring content, or if you have larger producers or even smaller producers with an interesting catalog, are you willing to have conversations with them direct, or realistically, is it acquisitions being purely made through distribution businesses?
It really depends on the size of the library that the production house has. I mean, we definitely would be interested in also talking to to that. I think it's, just in terms of resourcing, it's going to be hard to talk to every production house that has like very few titles, because we only have a limited number of people that can actually have those discussions. But overall, it's absolutely, when there is an attractive library, an attractive content selection that we can acquire, that would be absolutely interesting for us.
Those buyers, are they based in those regional offices that you mentioned earlier on in terms of Canada and the UK and Germany? Are they all based internationally, or again, are they purely based out of the US?
No, I think it's a mix. There is obviously a larger team in the US that is acquiring from the companies that are based in the US. But we also work with local providers in the UK, for example, also in Canada. At the moment, we are not planning on launching the Roku channel in Germany. So when we launch in Germany, that will not include the Roku channel, so not our own AVOD offering, and also not the premium subscription part of that offer. So, but in the UK and Canada, we definitely are in touch with local providers already.
So if any producers or distributors that you're not already in business with in the UK, for example, will include a contact detail on the episode description of this podcast, and they can send that email and get in touch with you guys.
Great.
So in terms of other recent big deals that Roku has done, you also acquired This Old House Ventures, which is the company behind that 42-year-old home improvement brand. Can you see yourselves doing more of those types of business acquisition? So acquisition of a business, but also obviously of that back catalog as well?
I think it's one possibility in the toolbox, right? So This Old House was a great acquisition because, it's been around for a very long time. It's a very trusted brand in the US. It's already made some inroads internationally as well, but it's the home improvement iconic kind of brand in the US. So if that becomes available, and it also includes production facilities, which you can then continuously using for the brand, but you can also venture out of those brands, using that brand and doing, additional shows with that brand and work with that team and create more great content for our customers. That is something that we absolutely look at. Of course, that would be the full package deal. But overall, we're always looking for the content first, for how much the content is actually fitting to our customer base, and then we look at the deal that can be struck in the back. There is no kind of boilerplate deal that we go out and say, okay, we always buy companies like This Old House, and we always buy the entire company. There is various ways we can strike a deal there.
It must be exciting being part of this. You said 2,000 employees, hardware and software consumer business, that you can be so opportunistic and go out and buy all that, Quibi content and businesses that have the sort of content that you're looking for. It must be really exciting from your standpoint, and seeing what opportunities present themselves, and then you get to go out and launch them.
From my end, really interesting is to see this large ecosystem that Roku offers, right? Starting from like a big engineering team, the US making the best hardware possible, working with the TV manufacturers, making sure that our operating system gets really well implemented into all of those and then see, going to the Media Markt or going to the Caris or the Argos of this world, and then go in there and see a Roku beautiful TV there, and then opening it up, and then basically see how many content deals we've already done in terms of getting Netflix and Prime Video and all the big partners onto the service, and then being able to also have our own service on top of that, and being able to acquire content for all of those, and then also monetizing it, right? But that's something we haven't talked about this at all, because 2/3 of what Roku makes in terms of the revenue is coming from the platform revenue, not from the hardware revenue. 2/3 is from the platform revenue that includes content revenue as well as the advertising revenue. So we do have a big advertising business that kind of monetizes our customer base. So it's just a very large range of what the company kind of covers with relatively small number of people, right? We're not, the Amazon, which has like 1.3 million or how many, employees around the world. This is a pretty small company compared to those giants that we kind of run against every day, right? Where this is a kind of a David and Goliath story, but and that's what makes this role in this company so excited, that you can basically see you can see the entire customer journey from how the hardware is built to how we monetize. So the entire journey, and how do we make that journey as pleasant as possible for the customer, so that it's the customer finds exactly the entertainment that the customer wants for that in that minute when it arises. So it's that, I think that's the fascinating. That's one of the reasons why I joined the company in the first place, is to see that large ecosystem and like end to end.
And we've seen all of the AVOD forecasts, the forecasts of how the industry's going and where AVOD's going to be in 5-10 years' time. I know Omdia did some research fairly recently, which showed the growth. So it's a very exciting time, I guess, to be at Roku.
Absolutely, and also with that international expansion that is happening at the moment, I think that's the most fun part of being at Roku at the moment, so that we can bring that successful business model and that successful product that we've had in the US for a long time, that it's been like perfectioned and optimized in the US for a long time. Now we can also bring it to the 1 billion broadband households that are still around the world, that are still in search for a smart TV user experience. That's the fascinating part. So bringing it internationally, making it international.
And now it's the time in the show where Miriam gets to nominate her story of the week, the TV industry news that's caught her eye in the past 7 days. What's your story of the week, Miriam?
Story of the week is that Viaplay is launching in 5 countries, one of them being my home turf, Germany, but also in the Netherlands, where I live right now. And that's, I think, fascinating, because you can see that there's still a growth in that segment. There are still like even European players that are going to other European markets, or that are going global. And there is more and more of those services coming. And it's not just, why that is fascinating is, first of all, it's not just the US players going global, but also European players going global. I think that's great news. We've only seen this in like smaller numbers of, BritBox, for example, is a UK example that went to the US and other partners, other parts of the world. But overall, that doesn't happen very often. So I'm very pleased that there is a European player that is coming. And we are obviously interested in always expanding our number of partners and expanding, the content that we can offer to our customers. So having that as an additional service that is coming and that is growing with the Formula One and the sports right that they bought exclusively, I thought that was fascinating. On the same token, there's also Mark Dorcel, who's the on the adult entertainment side, is also kind of going over the top now, and having their own kind of aggregated service. So there's more and more services coming, and that's exactly why platforms like ourselves are so important, that bring all of those services together, and that that make it easier for services, so for SVOD or AVOD or TVOD services to come onto a platform, and for manufacturers to use our operating system. So without the need to having to build and and maintain their own operating system. So we are the glue, and this is the more partners are coming onto those onto the platform, the nicer it is that we can offer that great content to the customers. So that's from my news of the week.
All right, okay, and it is interesting. I mean, even though you're working for an American company, that certain times you think, oh, Netflix is just steamrolling everybody, right? And there's no other, it's Amazon, some of the biggest companies in the world. They're just, this American dominance is rolling through the TV industry. But actually, you see players like Viaplay, and you realize that actually domestic players as well as US players they've still got a role to play in the international industry. So it's going to be, it's fascinating.
It's just very rare. It's just very rare, because usually you have local players that are really good in their local markets. The TV Nows in Germany, for example, the BBC iPlayer. There's on the public service broadcasting level. Usually they stay with in their countries, and they do it really well, and they add the local component that a lot of the kind of global services are still missing. But having like a European partner or having a European service that is actually going out and become international in not their home turf, that is pretty rare. So this is why I thought it was definitely worthwhile noting.
And now it's that time for Hero of the Week. Miriam, who's your hero of the week?
My hero of the week is Angela Merkel. Obviously, I mean, that's a little bit of a no-brainer. It's her last week in office. We have general elections coming up next weekend, and she's been in office for 16 years. So I have the impression that I cannot really remember a time where she was not in office. She made us a beautiful present. Now that the Europeans are allowed to go back into the US, I think she actually went to see and do her farewell tour with Joe Biden. And my theory is that she was managing to actually get us back and opened up the US for Europeans again.
I wonder if we'll see the love affair with President Obama rekindled, which is something all around the world that we're all fascinated with.
Now that they're both retired, there might be, be enough time for that.
There's no barriers for them now. But well, we had Gerrit on the show last week, and he was talking about the debates, the presidential style TV debates that are going on, and he actually threw those in the bin.
Yeah, I think a lot of Germans are very tired because there's been 3, and we have 3 candidates that are all fighting to take office, and none of the 3 have as much entertainment value as any of the US debates. So I think this is why everybody's like, okay, we've seen this now. We didn't actually need 3. The one was already boring enough.
Okay. Well, Miriam, what are you telling to get in the bin this week?
I'm really happy that virtual conferences are going into the bin. After like 18 months of doing everything through Zoom, including networking and just meeting people and having very targeted discussions through Zoom, I'm very happy that I can go to MIPCOM again just for a day and just to kind of to meet people in real life and talk about the business and the industry and content and all of those things in face. So I'm like face to face. I'm very happy that it's not going to be like a large event, but it's my first event after 18 months. And I'm very looking forward to that. So anything that is virtual conferences and virtual press interviews, we just did press interviews in Germany, where we did for the first time, real interviews with like people in the same room. That was the best experience after 18 months of doing Zoom. So Zoom and virtual conferences in the bin.
I look forward to meeting you at MIPCOM, Miriam. And I think you're right. As long as you don't put virtual podcasts in the bin, I hope, that would be a shame. But thank you for coming on the show. It's been brilliant to chat to you. I've learned a lot about Roku, actually. So thank you for spending the time. And I will see you for a glass of rosé on the Croisette.
Please, absolutely. Thank you for having me, Justin.
My next guest runs one of the UK's leading indies and is one of the most experienced voices in TV production in the UK. Melanie Leach, joint CEO of South Shore Productions. Welcome to Telecast, Mel.
Thank you for having me.
Now, a lot of people know you not only from your new business, but also from 2-4 Group, which you sold a number of years ago. And you produce shows like The Real Marigold Hotel, the Educating series, and The Jump for Channel 4, The Hotel Inspector, etc. So lots of really successful shows. How have you dealt with the pandemic at South Shore? Because obviously you were a new indie and we went headlong into this pandemic 18 months ago. And there's a number of businesses that have set up during the pandemic. You're obviously not the only one, but how's your experience been of starting a new business?
So we started South Shore about 2 months before the pandemic, I guess. And, prior to that, Andy and I had been at 2-4 together for a really long time with the team who came to South Shore with us. So, I'm not going to pretend it wasn't frightening. I think, it's always frightening when you leave a job you've been in for a really long time. And we were already, I think, quite scared about what it would be like to run our own business. And that was before we knew that we were going to end up trying to run one through the middle of a pandemic. Looking back on it now, I think in many ways it was as much a blessing as it was a curse. The pandemic was incredibly hard for all businesses in TV and beyond. And I think particularly difficult for some of the larger ones, actually, where, all production had to be stopped and, the management had to deal with a lot of furloughing. And in many ways, we were quite lucky that we weren't in that position at that time. We were a small startup, we were well funded, and we were able to just get our heads down and concentrate on development rather than kind of worrying strategically about how to survive.
I think we're finding this, or seeing this in the industry right now, is that all of those months of development that everybody spent is now coming through, and there's so many great ideas and so many projects that are getting green lit, which is brilliant. It's almost like that cork is coming out of the bottle after a number of months. Are you finding that? Are you finding that sort of we're a little bit of a mini boom time now coming into the end of the year?
Absolutely. I mean, I don't think I've ever known the market as buoyant as it is at the moment. It's a jungle out there. Finding staff is really difficult because all the production companies are really, really busy, which is great, actually. It's obviously difficult when you're crewing up, but it's also fantastic to see the industry bouncing back so strong.
Yeah. And you've got 2 offices, right? You've got one in Cardiff and one in London.
That's right.
Did you establish the business from day one with 2 offices? What was the thinking behind that?
I mean, we started just in London, but always knowing that we were going to end up with either a national or a regional office. That's always been important to us. I'm from the West Country, Andy's from Blackpool. We've both kind of grown up in television outside of London, and we're very, very keen to support, the nations and regions strategy. So yes, it was always our intention that we would have a second office. And we've opted for Cardiff because there's a great pool of production talent there. We know the area well because we had a couple of labels in Cardiff when we were at the 2-4 group. And, it's just a great place to do business. So yeah, 2 offices is where we're at.
So after building and then selling a £50 million turnover production business, what does that teach you about setting up a new one? Because you must have harbored thoughts of setting up for a number of years. I always imagine when people do that, in the back of their minds, they're honing this perfect model of a new production company. And as soon as they're out of their earn-out and ready to set up again, they've got this perfectly formed new business. I mean, is that how it was for you? I mean,
I'd love to say yes, but in all honesty, no, not at all. It wasn't like that. I think it's important to explain, 2-4, which, Andy and I looked after, it wasn't our business. It was founded by a man called Charles Wace, who initially sold it into private equity. And then subsequently it was sold to ITV. This is the first time Andy and I have actually run our own business. We were the custodians of somebody else's business at 2-4.
Right.
So yes, of course, we use that experience to prepare ourselves for running our own shop. But it does feel incredibly different. South Shore is a very, very different company to 2-4. And, our goals and our aspirations for it are equally different.
Okay. Well, tell us a little bit about that then. I mean, what sets you apart? What's your USP as South Shore?
Sounds cliche to say fewer, bigger, better because you hear it all the time in telly. But I think for us, that really is the case. We don't really want to end up with another business on the scale and size of 2-4. 2-4 by the time we left was and is a prolific producer making 20 or 30 series a year. It's a fantastic business. I think we would probably prefer to do fewer projects but on a bigger scale perhaps. So we're quite specific about what we will and we won't produce. We're only really in 3 territories. We make premium factual, and feature docs. We make fact and features programming, and we make entertainment. That's sort of it. And we probably won't deviate too far from that.
Right. Okay. So it's the premium end of the market you're very much focused on.
No, I wouldn't say premium in terms of budget. I would say premium in terms of IP generation, probably. So I grew up making daytime telly. I absolutely love daytime telly, and it's a big aspiration to have a big successful daytime hit here. Some people may not class that as premium. That is premium in my world. When you look across the international formats market, I don't think there's a producer alive who doesn't envy Come Dine With Me and wish they had it in their portfolio. Certainly we'd like one of those.
So that's interesting. Daytime. So we're actually not spoken about daytime on telecast at all. We obviously need to do a show dedicated to it, I think. What makes a great daytime show then? I mean, how does a great daytime show differ from a 8 or 9 o'clock slot on linear TV on a major network? How does it differ? How does the whole development process and what you're trying to achieve, how does that differ?
So I think the first thing to understand about daytime is it's incredibly difficult to come up with something that has the capacity to run for 100 or 200 episodes. It's much easier to come up with something that can play as a 3-hour box set, in my view. So finding an idea that is resilient enough to take that level of order is really hard. The very best daytime, and I think Come Dine With Me remains as one of the best examples of this in the world, is a really wonderful, flexible show because it can be made at any price point. It can play pretty much anywhere in the schedule. You can play it in any day part. You can put celebrities into it and play it in prime. You can make it a huge range of tariffs depending on where you want to put it. And it has a space in the schedule in every country in the world. Trying to come up with something as unique and valuable as that is incredibly difficult. And I think one of the greatest goals in telly.
If you're thinking of a particular show like Come Down With Me, I mean, that could play at any time in the schedule, for example. Mm-hmm. But if you're developing something, as you say, specifically for daytime, what's the key elements of that makes it daytime?
Well, it has to be able to do volume, and it has to be able to do volume at a reasonable price. And that's very difficult. You can't throw weeks of filming at a daytime program because you don't have the budget.
Okay. It's literally a case of getting something that's super adaptable and repeatable and scalable.
It's all of those things, and it's something that can be executed at a reasonable price and deliver in spades in terms of entertainment and quality. And those are hard and difficult projects to find, I think, and I really admire them when I see good ones.
Tell us about your latest projects then. I mean, I saw a couple of weeks ago an announcement for a new Freddie Flintoff. I'm a huge cricket fan, so that jumped out to me, a new Freddie Flintoff project. Tell us about that, because you've worked with him a few times in the past, haven't you?
We have, yeah. We've got a really good relationship with Freddie, and we absolutely love working with him. We made a documentary with him, which was the first commission that we had here at South Shore, where he talked about his bulimia for BBC One. And, subsequent to that, we've made a number of shows with him. And the latest one is called Freddie's First 11. It's going to be on BBC One next year. And it's a passion project for Fred. He brought it to us. It was his idea. He firmly believes that cricket has become too elitist. The vast majority of the England players have all been to private schools. It's very, very hard for kids in comprehensives to actually access cricket now as a sport. And as a result, he thinks that there's a whole generation of kids who are missing out on something that could really change their lives. And so in Freddie's First 11, he is going home to a club near where he lives and scouting for kids who have never played cricket and who would never even consider playing cricket. And he's going to try and put together an absolutely brilliant team to take on the very best posh schools in the UK.
I think that makes complete sense. And I guess for, viewing this with my own son who plays cricket, over the last couple of years or 18 months or so, with the pandemic, there was hardly any play at all. You couldn't play at schools couldn't play each other. It was, for a while, you couldn't actually physically, nobody could play it. So I think that's also probably exacerbated the problem as well. So it's not only certain kids would play cricket, but actually nobody could play cricket for 18 months or so.
No, I mean, nobody's been able to play any sport, have they? That's been, really, really terrible for the teens of today.
We spoke a lot about the factual market in recent weeks on telecast and changing buyers, changing models. As a relatively new indie, how are these changes affecting the way you do business? You talked about more premium end that you're looking at. Are you still pretty much focused on pitching and selling to the linear market and the SVOD platforms, or are you looking at different ways and more experimental ways of funding content?
I mean, I certainly would say the vast majority of our business, yes, still comes from, the main terrestrial broadcasters and the SVODs, 100%. But there are different models, and we are exploring different funding opportunities and also different routes of developing. So, yesterday we dropped our first podcast. That's the first podcast that South Shore has done. Again, you might enjoy this one if you like cricket. It's a cricket podcast, which is the story of Alan Stamford. I don't know if you have heard of him.
I haven't.
Oh, well, you should tune in. So this is for BBC Sounds, and we've done it with Greg James. And it's a very interesting story about a man called Alan Stamford, who basically came and tried to buy cricket. And as a result of making that podcast, we are now in production on a 3-part feature doc series telling that same story for Sky Docs. And so that's, I think, an interesting example really of how, you can use different platforms to develop content in that sort of premium factual space that can then lead to slightly more traditional commissions.
So that's interesting, because obviously podcasting is becoming a real development lab, if you like, for IP and TV ideas.
I think it really is, particularly in that sort of true crime space where, it's, so well received, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's unusual, the fact that the podcast is only just coming out, and you say you're already in production with the doc series.
We are, yes.
Right, very good. Oh, well, that's a good example of how the lab approach is working. What about distribution then? How do you choose the right distribution company for your properties?
I mean, it's quite straightforward for us because when we set up South Shore, we took minority backing from ITV Studios, and so they are our distributor. So it isn't something we give a huge amount of thought to be honest.
I didn't know that. I should have done my research a bit better there, shouldn't I? Do they have first option, or do they just essentially just distribute everything that you do?
They have first option, and they also don't have to take our content if they don't like the look of it. And if we have a deficit to fund and it isn't one that they're prepared to match, then we can obviously go out to market and talk to other distributors. All of our projects are sat there because they're a great distributor for us. They're really supportive. They do a great job with our finished tape and a brilliant job with our formats. So they're a good home for us.
And how about pitching and markets going forward? Presumably you attend most of the key markets like Realscreen, and do you go to Science Congress, or do you tend to go to MIPCOM, or do you leave that to ITV Studios to do that?
I mean, historically, we've always gone, but of course, nobody's been anywhere for 2 years, have they? So
Nope.
It will be really interesting to see how those markets recover. We're not going to MIP, in a couple of weeks' time. Maybe we'll go in the spring if it looks like there's going to be enough people there to justify the trip. But I think one of the upsides, I guess, of COVID, if there are any, is that it's become much easier to communicate with people, hasn't it? And so, actually, the need to be in those places face to face, I think, has been diminished.
So finally, without giving any trade secrets out to any young producers out there, but I'm always interested in execs that have run and grown really successful distribution businesses and then set up their own. I mean, what would be the tips for young producers that are just setting up you would give? What are the sort of top 2 or 3 bits of advice that you might be able to pass on?
Do you mean in terms of running an indie or running a distribution business?
Yeah, running an indie.
I mean, nothing beats hard work, I would say, is the truth. I think the more that you put in, the more that you will get out. Do everything you can to get the very, very best people you can get into your building. And then when you've got them, give them everything you can possibly manage to help them be a success. And I suppose my third tip would be just make things that you believe in and that you think can be good, because there's quite a lot of mediocre telly out there and nobody wants to make that.
And that's something that we've heard from quite a few producers over the past few months on Telecast. It's about being sort of true to yourself and making the shows that you're really passionate about, because that shines through not only when you're actually pitching it, because you're just so much more passionate and invested in it, but you care much more, I guess, about what comes out the other end when it actually comes out on screen. And that's the way that you build a brand, isn't it? By really doubling down on what excites you.
Exactly. And also, making telly is hard. It doesn't matter what type of telly you're making, it's really difficult. So you might as well make stuff that you believe in and that you're going to enjoy, putting on the screen.
What's your story of the week, Mel?
So I've gone for a story that ran in broadcast, which centres around Tim Davies saying that the industry has hit a tipping point with the top talent being tempted away to global networks. And I think he makes this point at a really good time. It's a time when we've seen a change in the culture sector here. The BBC have suffered a budget cut of, in real terms, of over 30% over the last decade, and they're facing a fight, I think, in terms of their renegotiations with the government. I very much agree with Tim and the article that's in broadcast. I think our PSBs are under attack, and I think it's the moment when the government needs to step up, actually, and support the BBC. The BBC is the envy of the world, and to continually cut it and continually try and attack it is really very damaging for us as a nation. I feel exactly the same way about the government's attitude towards Channel 4. I think the notion that privatising Channel 4 is a good thing is utterly ludicrous. That is a channel that has, over the course of its lifetime, invested £12 billion in the independent sector at no cost whatsoever to the taxpayer. They work with almost 300 production companies every year, which is significantly more than any other commercial PSB. They are an incredible supporter of the nations and regions and will spend half of their content budget, in the nations and regions before the end of 2021. And yet we're faced with a government who seem intent on privatising, and worse, have entered into a consultation where they haven't even published an impact assessment as part of that consultation. So, yeah, my story of the week is Tim's story, and my rallying cry to everybody is let's support the PSBs in this country.
How would you support them? I mean, in terms of, let's take the BBC first of all.
I would increase the licence fee and I wouldn't privatise Channel 4.
Right. Advocate increasing the licence fee. Okay.
100%. I think the licence fee is the biggest bargain I've ever seen. £159 for all of the services that the BBC provide. I'd pay double.
I think a lot of people would agree with you, particularly TV producers, but I guess to float that out into the general public, I mean, nobody wants to pay any more for anything, do they?
No, of course not. But when you then compare the cost of the BBC to the cost of a Sky subscription or to the cost of any of the other SVOD services that people are subscribing to, the BBC looks like absolute fantastic value for money.
Well, it's a good point. They've struggled to make that themselves, actually, over the last few years. But when it comes to Channel 4 then, I mean, you've obviously had lots of success with shows on Channel 4. So you're a case study, really, for an indie producer that's had an awful lot of success due to the network.
100%. And I can say with my hand on my heart, I would never have enjoyed the career that I've enjoyed in television were it not for the help and support of Channel 4, who I think are instrumental in growing small independents in this country and continue to be, the biggest buyer of independent formats in the UK.
So if it goes to Discovery, what do we do then?
Who knows? Because we have no idea what Discovery would or wouldn't like to do with Channel 4. But regardless of who it goes to, I take the view that if the channel is privatised, then it will fundamentally change the nature of the business. It's very, very difficult to perceive that profit won't suddenly become a driving factor in the decisions that are made around the schedule.
I still haven't seen the compelling case for privatising it. Maybe it was exacerbated, the plunging advertising revenue in the first part of the pandemic.
The reality is that Channel 4 has just posted, over £1 billion of revenues for the first time ever. It's in rude health.
And the way it's bounced back has been extraordinary.
And it has very strong digital revenues, and its digital revenue growth is ahead of its commercial PSB rivals. So, it's very, very hard to see the evidence for why the government would want to privatise Channel 4.
Maybe we'll try and get somebody on the show to actually, stand it up.
I think you should. Go and get Nadine and let's see what she has to say about it.
Well, I can try. Why not? Let's have a go. And now it's time in the show for your hero of the week, Mel. Who are you nominating?
So I'm going to nominate Mike White, the creator of The White Lotus, which for anyone who hasn't seen it is a satirical comedy on HBO set in Hawaii. I think it's just brilliant. I think the characters are brilliant. I think the cast is brilliant. I think the score is brilliant. I think it's just brilliant in every way.
All right. I've heard a lot about this. Hasn't quite made the watch list yet.
Clear your diary and watch that one tonight because it's really good romp.
Okay, brilliant. Well, we'll put a link in the episode description to that and your story of the week as well. And how about the bin? Who or what are you telling to get in the bin, Mel?
So I'm going to be really boring, and I'm afraid I'm going to put Boris in the bin, which I know is very predictable.
Boris.
But this week, I think, is an extraordinary week in Britain. We are seeing people having punch-ups in petrol forecourts because we've run out of fuel. We've got empty shelves in our supermarkets because there's nobody to pick or move the fruit and veg. We've got restaurants closing at lunchtime because they can't get any staff. And these are not problems that have been created by COVID. These are problems that have been created by our government. And that is the same government who seem intent on dismantling the BBC and trying to sell off Channel 4. So I'm afraid I'm going to be boring. I'm going to put Boris in the bin.
I think it might be the first time that Boris has actually been put in the bin.
Good. Well, I'm glad I'm a first.
Yeah. But I have to agree with you. My Saturday night, Mel, my Saturday night entertainment was queuing at a petrol station from 10 o'clock till midnight. And it was an experience that had everything. It was the world's slowest car chase. It had drama. There was a fight on the forecourt that I saw halfway through it. And right at the end, somebody actually having queued 2 hours, ended up putting the wrong fuel in the car and had to be pushed off the forecourt. So it had twists and turns. Maybe we can pitch that as a drama.
I think you'll find a buyer for that. It's a good tale.
All right. Well, we'll see. Mel, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been great to speak to you. All the best with South Shore, and we'll see you in real life very soon, I hope.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
And now it's time for our final guest on this week's show, and I'm delighted to welcome back our well-being expert, Tracy Forsyth. How are you, Tracy?
I'm really well, Justin. I'm really pleased to be back.
Yeah, it's brilliant. It seems to be weeks since we spoke. How was your summer?
Oh, very good. It's a long distant memory, but I managed to get away and get some vitamin D, which makes all the difference. And I think, oh gosh, it's actually starting to become a necessity rather than a nice to have. So I'm figuring out a way that I can actually retire to the Mediterranean or work from home from the Mediterranean. So that's my plan.
Wouldn't that be nice? Yeah, I mean, we're now into October. The nights are drawing in.
Yeah.
First rainstorm that I walked through yesterday got absolutely soaked.
Yeah.
We've got all of that to look forward to. But, there's lots of things to enjoy about autumn as well, aren't there?
Exactly. Yeah. And I've also been busy, Justin, launching my Fast Track to Fearless Academy. So that is it's an online academy where you can do all kinds of courses and group coaching, and there's lots of free resources. And it's devoted to helping talented people like those in the TV industry to develop the self-belief and self-confidence so they become fearless about who they are, what they want, and know how to get it. So I was going to talk to you about last week I did, or was it this week? This week, I think. Gosh, last week, sorry. Time is merging into one. I was very busy doing a 3-day challenge, a Fast Track to Fearless, from shrinking to supercharged self-confidence. And I thought it would be worth talking to you about it today, because I think with the return to work and the return to in real life markets and all the kind of flux that's going on, I think a lot of people have lost a bit of confidence having been through working at home and in the pandemic, so lots of clients were sort of saying to me, well, I'm just worried I won't have anything to say, or I'm just feeling a bit sort of weird about being out and about. And it's just such a big leap. I just thought, I'm just going to tell you the 3 activities that I did on the 3-day challenge.
Great. Okay.
They're all really simple things that are designed to help give you a boost to your self-belief and your self-confidence. So excellent.
That's what we need, a booster to go into the autumn and a bit of confidence. Okay.
Exactly. So as we have discussed before, Justin, this industry is full of amazing, talented overachievers. But the one thing that they often have in common is that they're incredibly self-critical overachievers. And often they have an image of themselves in their head that is much, much more negative than other people's opinions of them. So we walk around often, berating ourselves, putting ourselves down, kicking ourselves when we've made a mistake. And other people see this wonderful, talented, inspirational person. And there's a real sort of difference there. So, and I think that's wrong, because I think people are wandering around thinking, believing this negative self-image of themselves when other people around them think they're the bee's knees. So my first challenge was and you can do it maybe whilst we're doing this, let's see if you get responses, is to take out your phone and text 10 people in your phone, whether it's WhatsApp, Messages, Messenger, etc., and say, hey there, I'm doing a Fast Track to Fearless challenge. I've got to ask 10 people to describe me in 3 words. What are your 3 words for me? And actually on the night I was giving away prizes. So it would have been, if I win a prize, I'll share it with you. But what you could put there is like, if you do this for me, I'll buy you a pint, or whatever might be appropriate. So is that clear, Justin?
Yes. Yeah, no, that sounds great. I mean, you have to be a little bit brave to actually ask people what they think of you to start with.
That's why I call it Fast Track to Fearless. Listen, Justin, too much talent is going to waste. If the film and TV lot aren't brave, tenacious, go-getting, then who is? So I think all of you people listening are brave enough and courageous enough to go, hey, text 10 people, and they can include your mum and include people that you know are going to say nice things about you. Just say, hey, I'm doing this challenge, Fast Track to Fearless challenge. I've got to ask 10 people what words they'd use to describe me. 3 words. What are your words? If you do this for me, I'll buy you a pint. Okay?
That sounds a pretty good deal.
Yes. And so do that, see what words come back, and bathe in those words. The self-critical overachiever is likely to search through that list, ignore anything that is positive, and focus on something that might be mildly construed as critical. But what you will get back is an amazing list of words. It's what other people think of you. And even if you take into account, they're being nice, okay, you've given them free rein to give you 3 words, and see how those resonate with you, and choose 3 of those words, the ones that resonate the most with you. And I want you to practice saying it out loud. I am, and then your 3 words. So practice it in front of the mirror, practice it until you're not embarrassed, practice it until it trips off your tongue. I am XYZ. And listen, using that sort of exercise, or I always ask for feedback and testimonials in my coaching. The way people describe me is nothing like how I would have described myself. So the kinds of things that came back for me are things like life-changing, game-changing, revelatory, inspirational. So now, when I'm in a little bit of need a bit of a boost of self-belief and self-confidence, I think back to those words and say, I am a life and game-changing coach, an empowering force, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So how can that fail to boost your self-confidence?
Absolutely. And actually that little, it's easy. You can do it in 15 seconds. You can, get that text out there or that WhatsApp out there, can't you? But it's actually probably the biggest barrier to people, or their first step, isn't it, about addressing self-confidence issues, is probably the biggest barrier that may have to overcome.
Yes. But listen, guys, if you're in this industry, do not tell me that you cannot do this. In this industry, we have to hustle, we have to be charming, we have to organize stuff, we have to land deals, we have to get things in on budget. I will not accept that you cannot text 10 people out of your hundreds and hundreds of contacts and say, hey, I'm doing this challenge. I'm working with a coach. I've got to ask 10 people to send me how they would describe me in 3 words. What are your 3 words? I'll buy you a pint.
All right.
Okay?
Good. All right. Well, I hope everybody does that. That's pretty easy to do.
The second one was meeting and greeting your inner critic. And we've talked about inner critics before. So inner critics are sort of like, when you're going around life and you try to do something, and then almost like a thought bubble appears in your head, and it's a critical thought like, oh God, don't do that. You're going to look stupid. Or don't say that, you'll say the wrong thing. Or don't go for that job promotion. You're never going to get it. You don't have enough experience, that kind of thing. So what I want you to do is imagine take note of what those thought bubbles are and write them down, because they are thoughts, they are not you. And what I want you to think about is, if that thought had a body, or that voice had a body attached to it, like an avatar or a person, what would that person look like? What would your inner critic look like? Give them a name. Imagine what they look like. Are they tall? Are they thin? Are they wide? Are they short? Are they whatever they are? What do they wear? What do they sound like? What is their problem? So just create an avatar of your inner critic, and almost like you had a police lineup. If you've got more than one inner critic, separate out those speech bubbles, give them all attach them to an avatar, and then line them up in the police parade and have a jolly good look at them. So it's sort of separating out those negative voices in your head from you, because those negative voices, those inner critics, are manifestations of your feelings. And normally they are either linked to a fear, like, oh, I'm going to make an idiot of myself, or they're linked to a value that is not being fully met. So, for example, one person I did this with said, oh, I make formats, and my inner critic is like this really posh Oxbridge toff who makes documentaries and get Grierson Awards, and looks down at me because, I make formats. When we thought about, okay, well, what is the root of that? What is the kind of the feeling? What is the kind of prompt for that? What we realized is that what she was fearing was not being respected for her work. And as anybody who's known that she thought, well, my inner critic is sort of like going, well, nobody's going to think much of what you do and da-da-da-da. But this girl had done amazing formats that had traveled the world. And anybody who's worked in formats knows how hard they are to create, to structure, to bring alive, and not only that, but how to make them work so that they work universally around the world. And that's why they're so valuable formats. If they work, if you've got a Strictly or whatever that works around the world, then that is a massive, massive deal.
Yeah.
So meet and greet your inner critic and really take a look at who they are, what they look like, what fear or value do they represent? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm visualizing that producer with red trousers, bizarrely, but there we are. Okay.
Okay. Well, we can sort out what that is offline.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And how about the third?
The third one is to supercharge your self-confidence with a personal superhero. So when I was growing up, my hero was John McEnroe, the tennis player. And I know that's probably a bit controversial at the moment because he's been really rude about Emma Raducanu, etc. But when I was growing up, he was the bad boy of tennis. But what I loved about him was a number of things. One, he was like hugely creative on the tennis court. Like in those days, you had a lot of bass players and you'd watch these like volleys that went back and forth for like 10 hours, whereas he just went straight up to the net and like he was like super creative. But what I really loved about him is that he was so outspoken. He was so passionate and outspoken, and he was known as Super Brat because he argued with the umpire, and I think there was something that I loved about that, is that there was this position of authority and there was this brash, young, creative man who wasn't afraid to speak his truth, who went against the establishment and the authority, of the time. Nobody would speak to an umpire. And I'm not condoning rudeness or bullying or anything like that. But in those days, he was fighting about whether the ball was in. And we all know the ball was in and the umpire overruled it. Anyway, what I really loved about him was that his outspokenness and his ability to speak his truth, whether it was popular or not. I look at it back now with adult eyes and I see that was what it was. What your personal superhero tells you, the reason it's good to do that is it tells you what kind of values you really resonate with and that are important in your life. So, as I find myself now, 52, whatever, I realize that those values that I kind of like, the qualities that I admired in John McEnroe are very important, have been very important to me throughout this life. Speaking my truth, speaking up, not being intimidated by authority, and occasionally speaking out and it not really helping my cause, but doing what I felt was right. And so if you think about your inner superhero, it can be somebody from your childhood, it can be somebody that you're thinking of now. They will have qualities and values that you really resonate with. And so one, you can ask yourself, well, where am I showing those qualities already in my life? Where do I need to show them more? But my top tip for your personal superhero is when you're feeling down and you've got a lack of self-belief, ask yourself, what kind of pep talk would my personal superhero give me? I mean, listen, John McEnroe would make short shrift of me and tell me to stop moaning and get back out there. And the second thing is, what would your personal superhero say to your inner critic? And I'm fairly certain, John McEnroe would make mincemeat of any inner critic. Those are my three things. Does that last one make sense?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think it's a really interesting sort of 3-step approach to facing down your those sort of insecurities and visualizing them and dealing with them. And so this is part of your course it's your Fast Track to Fearless course.
Yes. So I am launching. So as you know, I do one-to-one coaching, but I'm launching by popular demand a group coaching program, 12 weeks. It's called Fast Track to Fearless Confidence. If anybody's interested, enroll now because it's closing soon. You can find out more details on fasttracktofearless.com, as well as all my other free resources to help empower you to get rid of that self-doubt and lack of self-belief and become fearless about your career, fearless about who you are, fearless and clear clarity on a career strategy so that you can deliver everything that you want to deliver in life and release your potential so that we can all enjoy it.
That's great, Tracy. Thank you so much. And we'll put a link to Fast Track to Fearless in the episode description as well of the podcast, so you can go there and take a look. Great to have you on again, Tracy. And hopefully you're going to come back really soon and give us some more tips.
I will do. Thank you, Justin.
Well, that's about it for another week's show. As always, thanks a lot for listening. Don't forget to rate and subscribe to Telecast and share it with friends and colleagues. And another quick reminder to sign up for our free newsletter called Telecast Plus. It's packed with interesting TV industry stories of the week you might have missed, and exclusive insight and opinion. And it's all completely free. Just visit our website to sign up at telecast-podcast.com. You can also follow us on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter. Telecast was edited by Ian Chambers and recorded in London. Until next Thursday, which is a MIPCOM preview show, as always, stay safe.